It was supposed to be just another ordinary day. But life had other plans, and sometimes it doesn't give you a warning, it just drops something on the ground and waits to see what you will do with it. Joaquim woke up to the sound of the roof creaking and the smell of damp mold that filled the house on cold mornings. The rain from the night before still trickled down the poorly sealed edges, dripping into the bucket he kept beside the bed. Another day, another silent battle. He stretched slowly like someone carrying years on his back and bills on his shoulders. In the kitchen, yesterday's bread was already hard. The coffee was just hot water with a little sugar, but he still gave thanks in silence as he did every morning. Alone since his wife passed, he lived in a tiny room at the top of the hill where the wind slipped through the cracks as if the house were made of paper. At 58, Joaquim worked as a construction helper. Hard work, low pay, but honest. He never complained, at least not out loud. He kept everything inside, like someone who knows there is no point shouting in a world that is deaf to those who have little. That morning he went down early to the bakery before heading to the site. The sky was still grey, the ground damp, the cold biting his hands. In his pocket, only a few counted coins, just enough for a roll and, if possible, a coffee with milk. He had no idea that what he'd find on the ground that day was worth more than every salary he'd ever earned. It happened when a coin slipped from his hand and rolled down the sidewalk. Joaquim bent down to pick it up, and that S when he saw it, a piece of paper, dirty, crumpled, barely visible between a puddle and the curb. Instinctively he grabbed it. He was about to throw it away, but something caught his eye. It was a lottery ticket, and not just any ticket. With his fingertips, he wiped the dirt off. The numbers were marked, and a red stripe on the top corner read, "Winner, draw 1523. He read it once, twice, then turned it over. Printed in small, inconspicuous letters were the words, 92 million. Joaquim blinked, once, twice. It couldn't be real. For a moment, everything went silent. The noise of the street vanished. The cold disappeared. Even the thought of bread and coffee slipped away. He stood there, frozen, holding that piece of paper like it was a stick of dynamite ready to explode. No one around. No name on the ticket. No clue who could have dropped it. The first thought that crossed his mind, this isn't mine. The second, what if I keep it anyway? It was a lot of money, enough to fix his entire life. The leaky roof, his late wife's funeral debt, the treatment he'd been putting off, the future he never had, everything. But the longer he stared at the ticket, the heavier his chest felt, as if he were holding a secret too big for his hands. He slipped it into his pocket and walked into the bakery, bought the bread but forgot the coffee, paid with the coins and left without a word. The ticket felt like it was burning inside his coat. Walking back, he felt like everyone could tell, like every look was a judgment, his mind was a storm. What should he do? Return it? Keep it? Throw it away and pretend he'd never seen it? But how do you pretend when the chance to change everything just appeared right in front of you? Back home, he locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. Took the ticket out again, read every number, checked the date. Everything matched. It was real. It was his. Or rather, it was with him, but not his. He turned on the old radio, more out of habit than anything else. Then he heard it, a short news report muffled by static. Resident from the north side of Belo Horizonte loses winning Mega Sena ticket, offering a reward to whoever finds it. Joaquim's eyes widened. The neighborhood name matched. The date matched. It was the one. It was his, or rather, the other man's. The man's trembling voice came through the radio. A simple man with a sick mother and overdue bills, crying, begging. That money was our only chance to survive. Joaquim turned the radio off, his breath heavy, his throat dry. And then he understood. That piece of paper wasn't a blessing. It was a test. He stayed awake all night, pacing across the tiny room, thinking about everything he could have, everything he'd never had, and everything he still could be. But there was one thing he'd never lost, his conscience, and it spoke louder than any number ever could. In the morning, he washed his face, combed his hair, and put on his best clothes. He took the ticket, folded it neatly, and placed it in his chest pocket. Walked down the hill on foot, feeling the light weight of the right decision. He reached the address mentioned on the radio, a modest house with peeling paint. He rang the bell. An older man appeared, eyes red from crying, face worn out from losing too much already. Joachim said nothing. He just reached out his hand, the folded ticket resting in his palm. "I think this belongs to you." For a second, the world stopped. The man looked, disbelieving, fell to his knees thanking him through sobs, tried to hug him, to pay him, to give him something. But Joachim only smiled, that calm smile of someone who can finally breathe. "Don't worry, what's yours needs to be with you." And he turned away, walked back up the hill. No millions, no party, no glory. But with something no one could ever take from him. Peace. The story could have ended right there, at that peeling gate in front of that house. But the universe is made of echoes, and when an act is genuine, it doesn't end, it ripples. At first, only the neighbors knew. They talked about it at the market, in the butcher line, in the church circle. "That's the man who returned the winning lottery ticket." Some looked at him with admiration, others in disbelief. Some whispered he was a fool, but no one could ignore him. Joachim, on the other hand, kept his routine. He went back to the construction site, muddy boots, calloused hands. The cement was still heavy, the pay still small, the lunch still simple. But something inside him had changed. A lightness that only those who faced temptation and conquered it could understand. On the third day, a reporter showed up at the construction site. Young, hair tied back, eyes shining. She'd heard the story by chance and decided to see for herself. She sat on the curb beside Joachim and listened to every word without interrupting. He told everything, no embellishment, no drama, just truth, raw and clean. The report aired that very night. It started small, local news. But within hours, the video was everywhere. TV, social media, WhatsApp groups. The man who turned down 92 million for integrity. The next day, Joachim couldn't work. Too many people in front of the site. Reporters, curious onlookers, emotional strangers wanting to shake his hand. An old lady cried in his arms. A young man asked for advice. A child said, "I want to be like you when I grow up." He didn't understand the fuss. He didn't see himself as a hero. And maybe that was exactly what touched people the most. He wasn't expecting anything in return. He wasn't chasing fame. He just wanted to sleep in peace with his own conscience. By the end of that week, the bakery owner, the same one who'd let him buy on credit for years, left an envelope on the counter. Inside, a handwritten letter and a small amount of money. "For a man who reminded me that hope still exists." Joachim returned the money but kept the letter. Then more letters came, from places he'd never heard of. People saying they were tired of the world and that his story had reignited a spark in them. A woman said she'd called off her divorce after hearing his interview. A father wrote that he'd started talking to his son again. It was as if Joachim's act had touched something invisible inside people, something they'd forgotten they still had. Still, his daily life hadn't changed. He lived in the same house, with the same leaky roof. His back pain was worse. Money was tight. And though he refused help, his body showed signs of wear. The world, now applauding him, couldn't pay his bills. Then one Saturday morning, as he was sweeping his front porch, a black car stopped in front of his house. A well-dressed woman stepped out, elegant, but with humble eyes. She said she represented a foundation that worked with social projects. They'd seen his story. They were opening a new community center in the countryside of Minas Gerais, and they wanted him to be the coordinator. Joachim didn't get it. He said he knew nothing about management, didn't have the education for it. But she smiled. "We're not looking for a manager. We're looking for an example, someone who inspires, who listens, who's there." The job paid steadily. There would be a simple house provided and healthcare. It was more than he'd ever dreamed of having. He asked for a night to think. He thought about his wife, about his poor childhood, about a lifetime of just surviving. And now, it was as if life was finally offering him a gift that made sense, a place where he could still be himself, but with dignity. The next morning, he accepted. He packed a small bag, 2 shirts, a pair of slippers, a toothbrush and a faded photo of his wife. He took the bus and left. The town was almost 6 hours away. The road was long, but he smiled as he looked out the window, for the first time unafraid of what lay ahead. When he arrived, they welcomed him with hot coffee, cheese bread, and warm hugs. The town was small, but full of heart. The social center was new, full of children and families with stories much like his own. Little by little, Joachim found his place, not a place of power, a place of respect. He started tending to the community garden, helping in the classes, listening to those who needed to talk. He didn't command, didn't impose, he just listened and cared. And, without realizing it, he became something money could never have made him: a pillar. There, he discovered that true wealth doesn't live in what you own, but in what you plant in the hearts of others. And sometimes, giving back what isn't yours, there's what finally opens the door to what always was. Time moved slowly in that small countryside town, but Joachim's heart seemed to beat in peace. Mornings began to taste like purpose, afternoons smelled of wet soil and children's laughter, and nights were finally silent again, not with loneliness, but with calm. He never spoke about the ticket, never. And those who knew the story respected that silence, because there everyone understood that what truly amazed them wasn't what he had done, but how he kept living as if he hadn't done anything at all. In his new simple home, he had a backyard with a guava tree, an old hammock, and a rocking chair. Little by little, he filled the walls with photos of the kids from the community center. He wrote their names on the back of each picture, as if they were life-as-borrowed children. One day, while tending the garden, he got an unexpected call. It was the same man he'd returned the winning ticket to, the millionaire. His voice on the other end was still humble. He said he'd started an NGO with part of the prize money, inspired by Joachim's act, and he wanted to name the next branch after him. Joachim smiled. He didn't want any tribute, but the man insisted, "People need to remember there are choices that aren't worth a cent, but are worth the whole world." Joachim agreed, not for the name on the wall, but for the lives it might change. A short time later, a TV crew came to film the inauguration. During the recording, one of the children walked up to him and asked if it was true he had thrown away millions. He chuckled softly and replied with a smile, "Didn't throw them away, just returned them to where they belonged, and I got something else in return." The girl frowned. "What?" Joachim pointed around, the center, the people, the clear sky. Peace, love, direction. That same day, he got another surprise. An online fundraiser, made by strangers who'd been touched by his story, had raised enough money to buy him a house in his own name. A simple house, but with a solid roof. What he had turned down in millions, life was now returning in care, in its own time, in its own way. He wanted to share it all. Part of the money went to the community center. Another part, to struggling families in town. He didn't keep much. Joachim never wanted to accumulate. He wanted to spread. At the end of that year, he was invited to give a speech. He said he wasn't good with fancy words. He walked onto the stage wearing a button-up shirt and worn-out sandals, looked at the full audience and said, "Life tested my soul with a piece of paper. I could have been rich, but I chose to sleep in peace, and look where that's taken me." The room fell into such deep silence it felt like no one was breathing. Then he finished, "Honesty doesn't give you everything you want, but it gives you exactly what you need, and that's worth more than any winning ticket." As he left the stage, a young man approached him in tears. He said that one sentence had changed the way he saw the world. Joachim hugged him, and in that moment, without realizing it, he understood. The universe had already answered, not with money, not with luxury, but with people, with purpose, with peace. Today, if you visit that small town and stop by the main square, you'll see a simple iron statue with a small plaque that reads, "Joachim, the man who never got rich but made the world more valuable." And if you're lucky, you might still find the real Joachim sitting right beside it, in his rocking chair, telling stories, always ending with the same line. Doing the right thing is like planting a tree. It takes time, but when it grows, it gives shade to many.